Good morning. Today is Sunday, November 27th. Um, let's make our aspirations and set our intentions by saying the Four Measurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So we'll meditate for a little bit, and then Victoria's going to speak a bit about some things. Continuing a little bit on last week, I want to read you something by Zonsar Khyentse Rinpoche, who we've spoken about in this class many times, who we encourage you to read, to find his teachings. Siddhartha's Intent is his organization. They have a great, just a great library of teachings of him online on YouTube. Initially, to understand Dharma, even on an intellectual level, is not at all simple. Then once we have some understanding, to put Dharma into practice is even more subtle because it requires that we go beyond our habitual patterns. Intellectually, we may recognize how our narrow-minded habits have brought about our own cycle of suffering. But at the same time, we may also be afraid to engage wholeheartedly in the process of liberating these habits of ours. We'll read that again. At the same time, we may also be afraid to engage wholeheartedly in the process of liberating these habits of ours. This is cherishing of ego, for even if we think we want to practice the Buddhist path, to give up our ego clinging is not easy, and we could well end up with our own ego's version of Dharma, a pseudo-Dharma, which will only bring more suffering instead of liberation. And we spoke a little bit last week about spiritual materialism. And I think it's good to examine what you expect to get out of meditation. Your expectations for doing this class, if this is your first time or this is your only real practice, and we've always been encouraging you to, if this path and these things we talk about here inspire you, to really seek out authentic teachers from authentic lineages, read their books, watch them on YouTube, go to their teachings in person if you can, participate in their teachings online, live stream, which is possible now. We spoke also about what we're doing here is not to become good at meditating. Meditation is not something like you do 3 times a week, like 20 minutes on a treadmill, and your health improves. And it's part of your whole kind of thing about eating better and getting good enough sleep. I mean, meditation is not an end to itself. I think people have a kind of a misconception that by meditating a few times a week, they're going to be calmer and have less anxiety, which may be true. I'm not really sure. I can't say that that's the case. I came to meditation through Buddhism. So for me, meditation is never separate from the teachings and the Dharma. And I think for me, that's very important. Because through meditation, what we're doing is not just trying to calm ourselves down or have less anxiety. We're really cultivating awareness. We're cultivating an awareness so we can have a better understanding of what we want to do and what we do through our body, speech, and mind. And that we can learn through Dharma more of what the truth of our reason for being here is. and what the true source of real happiness is. And it's not just us being calm. It's not just us having less anxiety. That's not the, you know, an end to itself and the beginning of our happiness. You know, there's lots of ways to be calm and have less anxiety, but there's not a lot of other ways to cultivate awareness and understand the nature of our mind and the nature of who we really are. There's not a lot of other ways, and I don't think it's really possible without meditation. Mm. So, with that in mind, let's meditate. And let's start with the 9 purifying breaths that Victoria always so eloquently explains very well. And then we'll take it into meditation. Maybe we'll do a little bit of guided meditation in that. If those of you who are very new, who don't know the technique, I'm not going in detail over it again. The first 2 teachings of 2022 have a very detailed explanation, as do 2 weeks ago. Was that the 13th of November on YouTube? There's a detailed explanation of the basic technique.
The 9 breath purification is designed to rid our body, speech, and mind continuum of the negative energies that we store. We visualize ourselves. Now, this is the more correct version of ourselves rather than just simply a meat bag. We're thinking of our energetic pathways that are connected to our awareness, to the energy of body, speech, and mind. The body is a vessel, and it's driven by the energetic pathways of our awareness. The 3 channels are the central channel through which we expel ignorance. It is the blue central channel. It's like a pillar that holds the house. It goes through the entire body, from our secret chakra to our crown chakra. And the 2 side channels, the white and the red. The white is connected to, through the white, we expel our anger. Through the red, we expel our desire. So Vajra fist, holding the thumb at the base of the ring finger, and we inhale the pure air. And we expel the negativity. We switch for the other channel, the other side channel. Inhale the pure. Expel the negativity. Holding the Vajra fists, we place our hands on our knees, and now we're working with the central channel for the 3 breaths.
Central channel is blue.
And on the 3rd breath of working with ignorance in the central channel, we will go through our crown chakra. And when we expel the ignorance, we will merge consciousness with space.
Take that right into meditation practice. Relax. Some of you may be focusing your breath on the point between the nostrils and the upper lip, focusing your attention on that movement of breath. Some of you may be just focused on what the mind is doing, the image of the vast, stainless, calm, limitless clarity, sky-like nature of mind, and observing how our thoughts arise. When the thoughts arise, we can just become aware of the fact and go back to the breath, focus our attention again, or we can just imagine it like a cloud that has arisen in that sky-like nature of mind that just dissolves back into it. The calm being the baseline, the calm being something we could settle back into. We're not rejecting the thought, we're not following the thought, we're not saying the thought is bad, we're not saying our meditation is bad. This is the practice. We're not judging the thought as a good one, a bad one, an angry one, a jealous one, a pleasurable one, but just seeing it as a movement of the mind, recognizing it as a movement of the mind. Back to the breath. If you're having lots of thought, just keep applying the techniques. Don't be concerned with the frequency, the repetitive nature, or the frequency. Just keep applying the same thing. That's all you have to do. You can move or shift if you feel tension and settle back. Okay, great. Victoria's going to speak for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll take questions. There's a Q&A function, and you can ask questions about whatever any of us spoke about, or your practice, meditation, questions.
First of all, I want to remind all of us that we are here today taking our time, trying to cultivate our awareness. We're here all joined in this practice as a Sangha to try to bring about transformation into our life. I want to commend all of us for taking the time and having the commitment to want to have a life that's more filled with meaning and less filled with afflictions. Before I speak to something that we spoke a couple of weeks ago about our afflictive emotions, I just want to remind everyone that the word Buddha is kind of a fancy but not so fancy word for our basic nature. Buddha means one who is awake, being awake. It's someone who, through cultivating the degree of awareness, shedding the degree of light, uh, annihilates the darkness, the internal darkness of ego and afflictions, and becomes awake to one's own nature. So, Buddha is a universal condition without disregarding the label itself, because the word Buddha is a Sanskrit word, but it's not a cultural thing. It just means uh, a condition of a sentient being that is fully awakened, fully blossomed, fully allowed in its complete potential of its nature. It means something that we find that we all have. It doesn't mean something foreign, something that we get from somewhere. It's not anything external. It is just the internal, it is an arising of our full arising of our internal condition, of our full potentiality. It's like a flower or a tree or anything that is in its seed form is allowed to grow to its fullest extent and to blossom and bear fruition. That's what Buddha is. And the word Buddha is very precious because it reminds us that we wake up, from the sleep of samsara and suffering, and we end cyclic existence. We end the night of samsara and suffering, and we wake up to a different kind of life. And we do it while we're still in our bodies. We can do, we hope to bring about this kind of fruition while we're still here. And we wake up to a different way of being, a different way of seeing, and a different way of acting. Dharma can be looked at as a map. So if we have the treasure map, we have the teaching that tells us Buddha nature is right here, the cross is right here. What do? We don't just study the map in order to imprison it and say, I have this book, I have this map, I know where the treasure is, but we never go and explore and find that treasure, which is our Buddha nature. That would be a misuse of Dharma. That would be like, like if the Dharma was medicine and the Buddha was the doctor. If the Buddha told us, here's the map, take this map, this is the map to the hospital, you're sick, so go and get your medicine or go get your medical intervention at such and such a place. Would we just take a car, drive to the hospital, sit in front of it, never go in, never get our prescription filled? Would we not take our medicine if we truly understood that we were ill? So, that would be kind of a misuse of what we're doing here in this class, misuse of what we call practice, not taking the medicine, not practicing in order to cultivate our awareness, in order to wake up and to end the sleep of suffering, in order to end the sleep of samsara, would be this kind of an imprisonment of Dharma, what Dzongchen Khyentse Rinpoche referred to as the the Dharma of the ego. It's like holding the medicine here that can cure us, that can cure the world, but holding it and hoarding it only for ourselves, but not sharing it, not using it, not actually taking it to eradicate the illness of ignorance. So I just wanted to say that we have these fancy words, but we have to know what they mean, and we have to really understand what they reference and what we have to do with them. So practice, again, as Michael said, is about cultivating awareness. Why do we study? Why do we practice? We practice only, we step on the Buddhist path only to deepen our awareness. And we practice for no other reason than to dispel ignorance. and to deepen our awareness. Because it is only when we deepen our awareness can we finally understand the causes that lead to suffering. And it is only when we deepen our awareness, we take the medicine, we see the doctor, we go to the hospital, we schedule the time for surgery, we sit in practice because we want to eradicate the causes of suffering. We want to eradicate the causes of affliction. That's why we work on cultivating our awareness. And awareness is not something that we have to hold in a golden cage, like practice 20 minutes a day and say, okay, I'm great because I did this and this and this. No, we actually practice so that we can bring our awareness everywhere we go with us and affect the world. We want to be practitioners in the world. We don't want to be practitioners 20 minutes a day. We want to be practitioners. We want to cultivate awareness all the time. We actually only sit on the cushion so that we can bring our awareness into every ordinary situation wherever we go. It's like the medicine. If we discover the medicine, we want to bring it everywhere with us. We want to share it with everyone. We want to shed the light of awareness onto every dark and difficult situation. And so it is because we start to understand by bringing our awareness into dark, difficult spaces, we start to understand how suffering arises. And we try to, in practice, we try to cultivate the methods. We use the methods and the means of Buddha Dharma in order to abandon the suffering. What is suffering? Suffering is always, and in every single case, is self-grasping. So we spoke about afflictions last week. Afflictions are the suffering. It's not that my problem is that if I envy my neighbor's big house, that it's not having the big house that is the suffering. The suffering is having the affliction, because at the same time, I could be living in a tiny little house that is filled with love and beautiful family and compassion and joy. So why am I not being satisfied? Why do I not look at my little house filled with joy, filled with laughter, filled with all the things? Why do I not see that it is my affliction of envy, of desire, maybe even possibly hatred that's intermixed into it, that is causing me not to see the joy of my little beautiful home with my beautiful family? And suddenly I get eaten by the affliction.
And affliction, you're speaking about emotion. Yeah?
Emotion.
Emotions. Can
They're
you
always
just define that?
Afflictions are always emotions that are driven by conceptual constructs, because conceptual constructs are what drive us. I need this, I need that. And often we can't even speak to, why do I need this? Why do I need a bigger house if I'm perfectly happy and fine in my beautiful small home with my beautiful family? Why do I need a third car? Why do I need this thing that I call this, major career move? Why do I need to buy someone's house that is in foreclosure? It's not so much that the things out there that drive us mad. It is really the internal states of afflictive emotions, of desire, anger, arrogance, ignorance. And ignorance is, of course, the base cause. Ignorance is the thing that does not allow us to see that it is the affliction that is driving us mad. It is the affliction that is poisoning our mental, the body, speech, and mind continuum. It is the affliction that is the true cause of suffering. So we allow our awareness to shed the light on that ignorance. We allow our awareness to drive our life, because ultimately all sentient beings, in Buddhism, all sentient beings are defined as desiring happiness and wanting to avoid suffering. But we don't always know how to pursue that. We We don't know how to do that. Often our pursuit of happiness is connected to just desires, uh, to envy, to being driven by our afflictive emotions. And as a result of it, we spend our lives pursuing things we don't really know why we're pursuing them. We don't understand the nature of this pursuit, and we don't understand how in that pursuit we are causing suffering. Because when we're angry at someone, it is not the person's fault. The suffering itself is not the person. The suffering itself is the anger. It's the internal state that we are experiencing when we're engaging with that person. If we change that anger for awareness, for example, if we knew that that person too is driven by anger, so they are under the influence of the affliction. But if I was able to put out that fire internally, I would no longer be afflicted. And if I didn't feel anger, and if I didn't act on anger, if I didn't bring it about from my internal state, from my ignorance, if I wouldn't act on it, if I wouldn't speak through it, if I wouldn't do things through it, I would also not bring about causes and conditions of my future suffering. So that's really, what awareness is. Awareness is knowing that suffering always arises wherever there is ego and there's afflictive emotions. And the minute we act and put that out into the world, we're already producing causes of suffering for our future. So if we grab someone's house at a foreclosure, we grab the bigger piece of steak, we eat more, we drink more, our sufferings already is, in production for the future life. So we should not be surprised when in the next life we are homeless, or we have so little, we are destitute. Why? Because the way we've acted in the previous life or in this life earlier, temporarily, when we grabbed for what doesn't belong to us, when we grabbed for more, we've created causing and conditions for suffering. We also know that when we pursue, we act on our afflictions, very quickly something that we like becomes an obsession, becomes an addiction, and pursuing that pleasure causes and drives more and more and more suffering. And Rinpoche said that at a retreat we did last week, that in that particular case, we sacrifice our awareness to an object. We sacrifice our awareness to an object because very, very quickly, when we desire something so much, it really takes over our body, speech, and mind. And then we are bound by that desire. We're bound by that thing that's at the end of that desire, and we can no longer control it. The desire becomes so strong, the affliction is so potent that we become just slaves to it. And that is what suffering is. It's like a moth enamored by the light that burns itself. Most of our life, I'm actually at another teaching by uh, um, Khentrul Lodro Rinpoche. He said that 99% of our life is spent on pursuit of objects. These objects is where the sacrifice of our awareness happens. And a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about afflictions, and we said, do we want to be right or do we want to be free? I just want to remind everyone, we're not psychologists, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts. We are not dealing in that realm. We're dealing just in pure Buddhist realm, where we examine afflictions and the ego, because it's one piece. The ego is surrounded by the 5 afflictive emotions. We deal with those things only in the Buddhist context. And to add to that piece of puzzle, when afflictive emotions arise, I wanted to bring everyone's attention to this very subtle energy of the ego, because every time we have one of the 5 afflictions that arises, there's a very subtle energy of the ego that arises with it as well, because it's always the ego and the afflictions. They arise as this bundle. And how do we know when the energy of the ego is present? It's like this. So we talk about all these things. We say afflictions are the causes, are the suffering, are the causes and conditions of suffering. Afflictions are my enemies, not the person, not the situation. It's the affliction, it's the addiction, it's the obsession, is the suffering. But in that suffering, whenever we identify a certain, particular affliction, we say, I am angry, blah, 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 with that person. I'm angry with my daughter. I'm angry. Whenever this formula arises and whenever we hear it to ourselves, we say, yes, I understand, but yes, I know, but my mother is the most difficult person. Yes, I understand, but my child is the most difficult child. Yes, I understand, but my boss is the most difficult person. That's when we know the bell should ring, because that's the ego that comes right there. What Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche was saying, to make Dharma another ego construct, because the Dharma could be my Dharma, my this, my that. It's whenever we're not willing to use Dharma to recognize the affliction and the ego, whenever we say, yes, I understand, but my mother's the most difficult. We could be talking about a mother that's passed 20 years ago, where the true causes of that suffering are 20 years gone. But for some reason, we're still maintaining that situation. We're still talking about it. We're talking about it to our friends, to our family, to our children. Why do we do that? That's what we really need to pay attention to. We need to look when that formula arises, but formula arises. I get it, but in my case, it's the most difficult. What we should be seeing there, why do we maintain that suffering? Why do we continue this affliction whose causes passed away 20 years ago? There is something there that we desire. There's something there that's sacred for us. It is sacred for our ego. We want to maintain that affliction without with the causes that passed away so many years ago, because it gives us a certain kind of a satisfaction. It allows us to be aggressive with others because we say we have this reason, we have this ground, and we have to be extremely, extremely aware of it, that we have been stuck in a certain kind of like afflictive emotional situation for many, many years. Cause is no longer present, but we're still maintaining its status quo. That is the presence of ego. The ego energy is very subtle. It's the energy of affliction. I am angry with that I am angry. Anger is very gross. We can see its energy very easily. It's like a big log that's set on fire. At the same time, if I am angry with someone who's dead for 20 years, the affliction of the ego is like the energy of the ego is like a razor blade. We have to turn it this way to be able to see its surface, to shed some light on it. It's very, very thin. It's very, very subtle. So with affliction, there will always be that energy of ego. And every time we say, I understand, but my boss is the worst. I understand, but my child is the most difficult. Please pay attention to this very subtle energy of the ego arising together with the affliction. Become aware of it. And Khandro Rinpoche said in one of her teachings, she said, we really don't have to do any kind of crazy work. We really don't have to demolish and destroy the ego and the afflictions. All we really have to do is allow our basic nature to be. We allow our basic nature to emerge from under these layers of ego and afflictions. We allow to feel empathy. We allow ourselves to feel empathy for that very person with whom we are angry. We allow ourselves to feel and see the situation of that person whom we hate. We allow ourselves to ask our question, What is my state of mind that I'm feeling for that person? Is it correct or not? Because I want happiness and that person wants happiness. Am I in my heart right now being mindful of that happiness of that person? Or am I justifying this dual arising of the affliction and the ego and sticking to it like glue? Am I the spider with the web who's like bringing that person into that fold? So, like in the 37 Bodhisattva practices, the practice number 35, always ask yourself, no matter what we engage, before we speak and act, always ask, what is the state of my mind? And be honest. If you hear that phrase, yes, but, then know your affliction has occurred together with the energy of the ego. The ego is the ignorance. The ego is the suffering. Because the minute we stop being a spider with a web and we ask ourselves, am I really holding that person's welfare in my heart? Am I acting right in order to create their benefit? Then the very light of that compassionate mind, of our basic nature, will just shred the spider web, will shred the cloak of being a spider, will allow our basic nature to simply arise. And that's why we practice. That's what it means to bring awareness into life by practicing it on the cushion. That's what we have to do. Dharma is not a thing that we hold in our pocket just for us, like in the Lord of Rings, the golem holds the ring of power. No, that power is to shed light on all the things with which we interact in the world. It is for us to shed light into all the situations that come and arise as a result of our karma. We can change any difficult situation into a happy one the minute we allow our basic nature simply to be, because our basic nature knows what to do. If you're a mother and your child is in a burning building, you will run into that building without making a big plan. What do I do? How do I say it? You'll just run into the building and you will rescue that child. And now it is to apply that very love, that very empathy, that knowing what to do to every other situations. That's what it means to practice. That's what it means to use Buddha Dharma. And that's what it allows. It is allowing our basic nature, our basic goodness, to simply prevail in our life all the time, not to prevail the affliction and the ego. Yes, but my situation. Yes, but for me. If we try to dispel that darkness through allowing our basic nature, because our basic nature knows what's right and what's wrong. Because if we ask ourselves, am I holding that person's uh, welfare in my mind? You will always know who's in your interior space. Is it you in your affliction? Is it the ego in the affliction? Or are we actually being practitioners and holding the other person's welfare in their mind? So just keeping that in mind, Buddhas arise from altruistic motivation. Suffering arises from self-grasping. Where we have suffering, we have self-grasping. And if we are suffering consequences of our previous actions, such as lack of food, illnesses, difficulties, let's try and understand why we are experiencing these difficulties. And let's make these difficulties and suffering these difficulties be lessons for us. Let's experience them with grace and with awareness. And let's try to cultivate the Buddha mind. Let's try to cultivate allowing our basic true nature, our basic goodness, our basic awareness to always guide us in everything that we do, and be always aware of afflictions, the energy of affliction and the energy of the ego. Know these two things energetically. Scan your body and know when the triggers and neurons are happening. Don't speak through the afflictive emotions. Don't speak through the ego. Burst it with the light of our nature, and and allow something that we really, really are, not our concepts, not our desires, and not our afflictions, to permeate the world.
Great, thank you very much. We'll go to some questions if you have anything about what was spoken of today, or about your practice, or about meditation. There's a Q&A function. You can write the question. And just remember, like, for example, what anything Victoria was speaking about, this is not just like opinions, her opinions on mental conditions and process and stuff. This is, from what she's studied and what she's taught from her teachers, her teacher and the teachers she's read, and whatever bit of application, she or I have applied to our own life, and seeing the effect or success or failure of those things. It's not some consensus or some opinions that we're just talking about life and these things. 'Cause sometimes people, I think, get confused. It's not like this. There's a lot of approaches to dealing with negative emotions, self-help books and all kinds of things. We discussing things purely from a Buddhist and specifically a Tibetan Buddhist perspective.
Yes.
Okay. When you said meditation does not release anxiety just because you do it 3 times a week, are you saying meditation is not a solution for anxiety, or not to have the expectation? I didn't say meditation does not release. Yes. Am I saying meditation is not a solution? I'm saying not to have the expectation from meditation to be a cure for anxiety. That's what you just said. The last thing you said there. I'm saying maybe because you feel a lot of anxiety, you've been drawn to this class, per se, right? This class, we're talking about things from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective through what we've heard from our teachers. That's what we're discussing. And meditation is an aspect of Buddhism. Buddhism is not just addressing anxiety. Victoria went into a long elaboration of, basically kind of the core of her practice, which is cultivating an awareness. Awareness of what? Awareness of how our afflictions kind of dominate how we deal with our lives and how we treat others and how we pursue things and what our goals are and what karma we've created and will create. That's really the point of what we're doing. If as a byproduct you find that this kind of practice and this kind of study releases anxiety, fantastic. But I think just expecting meditation to be something that cures your anxiety, I'm not so sure that's very effective. I think you might be, like Zonsar Kensei says, it might be more effective to get a massage or something like that. I don't say that being flippant.
May I just add, there will be all these kinds of side effects and consequences of practice Buddha Dharma, but the intention, and the only intention of Buddha Dharma, is that we wish to liberate all sentient beings. When we wish to do so, we really understand that the meaning of life is this is the one thing to do with our lives. We then meditate and we work with our hopes and fears, with our expectations and the afflictions, afflictive emotions, things that we're afraid of, things that we're desiring and seeking, the pleasures and the pains. We examine and shed light on them. And needless to say, when we understand them better, and we also can kind of move away from that very narrow space of selfishness, there will be all kinds of alleviations and side effects, but they are merely side effects. They are not things that in Buddhism are pursued in and of for themselves.
When you mentioned about following a sort of pseudo-dharma resonated. Part of the issue is that as a 22-year-old American, I feel like my egoistic habits are being constantly encouraged and justified by American culture. that I and my friends are surrounded by. What would you say be the way to get away from that pseudo Dharma? Just having a consistent teacher community, maybe? I mean, first of all, I don't think you need to distill it to something like American cultures, causing you to feed your egoistic habits. Buddhism uh, was formed 2,500 years ago in India, so they were dealing with the same things, just not, just different forms of it. That's why, he spoke of suffering and the path leading away from suffering. So, you know, you don't have to like think American culture is bad or any different than any other culture or any worse or any better or anything like that. It's just your karma to be an American at this point in time in history, and you have to deal with those aspects of it and how it's affecting you and how you can affect it, basically. Um, Best way to get away from pseudo dharma, yes, the best way to get away from it is, yeah, I constantly emphasize this and encourage that, is if this path inspires you at all, find an authentic teacher and become a student of that teacher. Uh, we talk all the time about, I post teachings of teachers. We have it on the website, Solidago Productions, or the YouTube channel, Meditation with Michael Imperioli 101. And there's books and there's teachers, many of whom are still living, still teaching on YouTube. There's live streams. Do some research. Do some research about Tibetan Buddhist teachers or about Buddhist teachers or about people that I mentioned. Um, that's always the best way.
And I just wanted to add, I understand exactly what you're saying. I hope I do. The level of distractions, the level of addictions to uh, cultivating the self in our culture is extreme. Not just in our culture, I think in many countries of the world, especially the technologically well-to-do cultures. There's, the level of narcissism is tremendously encouraged. It is difficult for us to put our phones down. It is difficult for us to think, not posting what we eat and what we do, and all these are reinforcing very ignorant behaviors. And you're all completely right. So it's good that you understand that and want to move away from these kinds of distractions. Surely they will not lead to anything profound and meaningful, no question about it. But at the same time, uh, any situation can be used for good or opposite. So it is about finding the heart in every situation and bringing awareness to it.
Is visualization manifestation leading to suffering? Depends what you're visualizing and manifesting. You know, I mean, that's a very. It's not the visualization and the manifesting that's the problem. It's your motivation, and what you're aspiring to, or what you want to bring into your life. As parents, how do we balance honoring the happiness of our kids with what we know or think we know is best for their growth? There's so much ego tied up in parents' aspirations for our children. Very hard to release.
It's true. It's all about being aware of our internal states. In other words, not just be driven by conceptual things that often hide our investment and desire for our kids to manifest exactly as we want or things that we desire. It's about making sure, becoming aware. Are we driven by these conceptual structures that hide underneath our own latent desires and aggressivity and the way we're dealing with society and family? Or are we really what comes from us? It comes from the place of I want the best, and I hold the love, and I'm being open toward the happiness of my child. So, what desiring happiness for one's child is not I have all these formulas that the child has to go by. No, desiring happiness for our children is allowing them also to be who they are and understanding what will make them happy as stemming from them, not projecting from us. It's a fine line, absolutely, because sometimes we have to be wrathful in order to save them from stepping into a fire. But at the same time, we have to check ourselves all the time and continuously to make sure what our intentions are, what is intrinsic when we're speaking and dealing with the children. Love must guide us at every step. We have to desire their own welfare and be careful with not projecting too much onto them.
What are your thoughts on law of attraction assumption? I don't really know much about that. I mean, we talk about karma in Buddhism, and karma is really is about cause and effect, really. You know what I mean? You can't expect to have positive uh, results from negative actions. It's very scientific, in my opinion. You know what I mean? So um, they often say about karma is if you want to look at what you're in Buddhism, they also believe in reincarnation. A lot of people have problems and get stuck on that, but you can't separate reincarnation from shunyata or emptiness, and kind of the fact that self is just a cobbled together conglomerate of impressions and labels and things that we impugn onto it. But what's reincarnated and what doesn't end is mind stream and consciousness, and different forms get attached to that over the course of the existence of the consciousness and mind. But if you want to see what your past lives are, look at your present life. So whatever situation you're in, what your body is, what you look like, where you are, what your life is like, is a result of causes and conditions created through actions of body, speech, and mind in this life and prior. And they also say, if you want to see what your future lives will be like, look at what you are now. So what you're doing now, the actions that you take through body, speech, and mind will without a doubt infallibly have influence on the future of this life and the future of your next lives.
In Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are two obstructions to our Buddha nature to blossom. Our Buddha nature is always there. That means just the ultimate condition, potentiality of our nature. That's what the word Buddha really means. The two obstructions are the obstruction of ignorance. That's when we think that we're separate and we're something solid. The ego believes that it exists in this construct of self and other. And the obstruction of afflictions, it's our negative emotions. With ignorance of the ego and the darkness of the afflictive emotions, we build a web like a spider. And until that web is exhausted, we will wander in the 6 realms of cyclic existence. The only thing that can exhaust the web is when we have awareness to stop building it, and then all the karma that we have built previously will be exhausted. That's when there is liberation from suffering and ignorance.
I'd like to gift you something. Who can I contact? We don't really accept gifts.
Thank you for coming to class.
Yeah, you want to make a gift to us, just find a teacher and keep practicing, deepen your commitment to this practice. And
thank you for your intention.
yes, but you don't have to do that. Recommendations on books and teachings, yes, that's all on the website. Go to Solidago Productions or the YouTube channel. Lots of recommendations there. Meditation, Michael Imperioli 101.
And I highly recommend, Michael recommended Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche. I highly recommend, of course, our teacher, Garchen Rinpoche.
And Khandro Rinpoche.
And Khandro
lots
Rinpoche.
Of teachings on YouTube. How many hours a day should I meditate? How many days a week? The best thing to do when you're starting out, because you're saying you want to go back to meditation because you used to do it in high school, is the key really is to start to make this a regular part of your life. And it's usually easier to do that when you make it consistent time and place for it. just like anything, if you want to, you want to learn to play an instrument, you want to learn a language, you want to get in shape, it takes constant, regular uh, practice. So I'm not, you should start off. The best way to start off is with short sessions, like what we do here, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes. Start short, start small if you're just starting. 5 minutes, 3 minutes. But if you could do every day for 6 or 7 days a week for 5 minutes, that's a good start. Rather than an hour once a month or something. You know what I mean? It's really good to start making it habitual.
It's also it's very beneficial to do a morning practice before you do anything, to set your intention for the day, to say to yourself, I vow my best, to do my best, to dedicate my body, speech, and mind to virtue and for the benefit of others. And observe yourself through the day. That is meditation. Observe your mind through the day. And then practice in the evening. You can read something and then meditate on it, because in the evening, when everything is done, we're more relaxed. There's no place to run, things to do. We can really kind of access a more deeper part of ourselves. So those times are always extremely beneficial.
What meaning has meditation brought to your life every day? How does it influence your decision? Again, I'm going to reiterate, it's not meditation that's brought meaning into my life. It's the teachings, it's the Dharma, it's the dedication of the current teachers that I've been fortunate enough to have teachings from, and the teachings and the teachers that existed before that have passed these teachings on down for hundreds, of years. So that's the first thing. You know what I mean? um what meaning, when you start to think that there's a bigger picture, and that you know doing things for the benefit of others is really what brings happiness. I mean, that's a pretty important meaning. Now, I'm not saying that this is something that I've achieved and everything I do comes out. Not like a Garchen Rinpoche, whose every action of body, speech, and mind is for the benefit of all beings all the time. And if you become a student of his or start to attend his teachings, even online, you can see that manifesting in action of body, speech, and mind of a being. So that's why we always encourage you to find teachers.
Meditation is really there in order, because there's so many methods. 84,000 methods were given by the Buddha to counter 84,000 kinds of afflictive mental states. All these are means in order to cultivate virtue, which means loving mind, and to abandon afflictive mental states and bringing suffering to ourselves and to others.
Through my practice and reading and this class, I've been able to connect my anger and self-righteousness as the source of my affliction. What suggestions can you make, as I'm hard on myself through the process, to grant myself the freedom for suffering just as I would another sentient being?
You have multiple tools, even from the things that we've discussed before and we've practiced before. The 9 breath purification. When you feel anger, don't attach and start self-beating. What's important is to know when it arises, to know not to use it as a vehicle for expressions of body, speech, and mind, but rather than then transform it and allow your basic goodness to emerge. It's very, very important that we allow our basic nature to function in the midst of all that understanding of the causes of suffering, because it's twofold. First, we see what causes suffering, but then we also have to bring out the energy that causes happiness. The same causes of happiness for you will be the same causes of happiness for others. This is the nature of sentient beings, is to desire happiness, avoid suffering. So if we, through our awareness, can understand what I need to do to be happy, and that will immediately give you the causes and the foundation for acting beneficially for the sake of others. That is our happiness. So yes, one step is to recognizing and knowing that my suffering is my afflictions and my ego. At the same time, it's also allowing our basic nature to emerge and act freely, laugh like a child, be able to help without overthinking it, be able in every moment. We can exercise all the time our Buddha nature. We speak to people, we look at people, we do things with people. So every moment is an opportunity to do the right thing and not allow ourselves to engage in the wrong thing. Every moment could go either way. Every glance, every word, everything, what we do. Even when we're alone, we're thinking of others, we're thinking about the world. So every moment allows us the opportunity for the white or the black stone to be, put. It was like a story of a lama who started observing his mind, and he had black stones for every negative thought and white stones for every virtuous thought. And first, he would always be putting through the day just the black stones. And little by little, white stones would get into the pile until he was able to just have the white stones all the time. So it's like that. Do not fixate only on the discovery of the negativity, but at the same time, allow the positive to emerge and practice.
I like how you connected the practice to situations arising in life. You mentioned relationships, buying someone's foreclosed house. Do you have any good references for this subset of teachings? Well, this is not a subset of teachings. This is the teachings. I mean, the teachings are to be used in life, in situations, in all situations. So, it's the only good references I have is the ones I keep harping on. The teachers that we mentioned, authentic teachers of authentic lineages, and their books and their videos and their teachings.
Yeah, it's like waking up, Buddha meaning woken, somebody awoke. It's like waking up in every instance of our life. The way that I buy something, the way that I go at something, how I speak at work, what do I do with my child, everything, how I prepare a meal, how I drink my coffee. Am I doing it mindfully? Do I exercise the mind? And it's also to be aware that we engage in unvirtuous actions such as snatching a foreclosed house, or saying it's okay if I take more for myself and I fire these employees, forget whether they can survive and their families are going to be bankrupt and things like this. It's about not allowing our greed and our afflictive emotions to wipe out the awareness and the consciousness of the true consequences of how our actions are impacting others. When every moment of our life, we have to cultivate that awareness. That's what practice really is.
How do we reconcile suffering due to karma with social material structures that disadvantage some people more than others? This is something I struggle with. Yes, this is a very, very tricky thing. This is where many people get stuck on karma because they don't like to believe that in order to you can't really pick and choose the teachings of Buddhism, right? If you want to be Buddhist. If you want to commit to the Buddhist teachings, you can't really pick and choose. Well, I like the meditation, but I don't like the reincarnation. I don't like this, the karma aspect. I don't believe in that. Then you're kind of inventing your own thing that may work for you. And you could do whatever you want. It's not Buddhism, though. Like I said, if you look at your situation now, it's a result of causes and conditions as a result of actions of body, speech, and mind in this life and prior. And it can't really always tell from what. So material structures disadvantage some people more than others. Yeah. And if you find yourself in one, it's a result of karma. That does not mean karma is a punishment. It's the result of actions It's the result of causes and conditions created by actions. That also doesn't mean there should be some callous kind of disconnected attitude towards those suffering under these social structures, saying, well, that's their karma. You may feel that does not mean that you can't participate in society to correct injustices. That doesn't justify the injustices of society. That does not support the injustice of society by saying it's karma. Okay, once you accept its karma, now what? What are you going to do? Well, if you're not being suffering under the injustice of society, you may want to dedicate your time and effort and money towards helping correct those injustices. The fact that the injustices exist, even though they may be karmic, does not mean it's something we should have a laissez-faire attitude towards and just leave as it is because it's karma. And we always speak about, Buddhism does not mean being a doormat. This applies there too, you know. But you shouldn't look at other people and try to figure out their karma. You should really only look at your own. You know what I mean? If you're compassionate, you want to be a benefit to others and dedicate your life to helping people who are suffering under certain social structures, be it poverty or racism or discrimination, anything like that, and you feel that you're moved by that, that's really good, you know? But you should really only be examining your own karma and not just look at others and justify, well, they're in this position because they must have done. You don't know what they must have done. Only a Buddha can tell what, someone else has done in the past. You know what I mean? And what their true karma is. All you can do is look at where you are now, and you don't have influence over the karma you created in the past. You only have influence over the karma you create now, going forward.
We should always keep in mind that whatever arises only for a moment. We may have a really beautiful life and great circumstances now, but if we create causes and conditions by simply ignoring and not being, to be awake means to see the suffering of others. That's kind of like the very definition. To be awake is not to be a math genius. It's actually to kind of see the condition of all sentient beings, humans, animals, etc., etc. The cockroach or whatever little bug wants happiness and avoids suffering just as we do. And they fall into the same traps just as we do. So being awake is being compassionate, is seeing the nature of all existence as this twofold seeking and avoiding, and also understanding that what we have now is very, very temporary. So don't get lulled into things ever thinking, now my life is so beautiful, it's so great, it'll always be like this. There is nothing here in this world that arises that will remain like this forever. We will all have old age, sickness, and death. All creatures, all sentient beings, all living things will have those kinds of consequences. That's what being awakened means, to understand that, and to therefore, from understanding that, be the foundation for rising great compassion and living a meaningful life, meaning living through that understanding, because that's the view, and compassion is the activity that issues from that view. It's always to be aware in that way.
Okay, there's still a bunch. We'll take two more and then close. If you have more questions, you can send the email. Nick, what's the email address? Why do I always forget this? I'll give you the email address in a minute. Is it okay if I fall asleep during meditation? Well, if you fall asleep during meditation, you're not meditating anymore, you're sleeping. So you can't do both at the same time. So if you fall asleep, then wake up and just continue the practice.
Try to make sure the reason why we sit in the 7-point Vairochana posture is because it's the most conducive for our 3 channels, the energetic pathways, to be open. Our mind is not concepts. We have to start to think of mind as energy. Just as when we become aware of the afflictive emotions, sloth and other kinds of obstacles to meditation are also these kinds of energetic things that travel through our pathways. So understanding that awareness is an energetic thing, our intentions are energetic things, our actions and speech are energetic things, is to really kind of guard them and to know that these energetic things are in the positive, not in the negative, not slothful, not unattended. We meditate in these positions to maintain and guard awareness. Uh, Please understand, and I'll repeat it again, awareness is not a bunch of concepts. Awareness is the state of being awake and present.
Okay. Do you know if there's a nationwide organization that works with people in prison to teach them meditation, to introduce them to Buddhism? I think there's something called Dharma Prison Network. And someone says here, this is the last thing we'll take. Okay, so if we didn't get to your question and you really want to, Michael Imperioli, Meditation 101 at Gmail. Michael Imperioli, Meditation 101 at Gmail. How do you identify an authentic spiritual teacher? I don't know about spiritual teachers. I'll talk about authentic teachers in Buddhism, or specifically Tibetan Buddhism, which is we practice. I can't really speak to any other tradition within Buddhism or any other tradition, period. But if you look at teachers that come from an authentic lineage, as in Tibetan Buddhism, there's 4 main branches of Buddhism. And within those 4 branches, there are small, other, sub branches, right? But your teacher should be part of one of those lineages and be a teacher who has had teachings from prior authentic teachers in the lineage.
They call them qualified masters.
Yeah.
For example, our teacher comes from an unbroken lineage of masters that dates to the time of the Buddha. Authenticity of the teacher is very, very important. Falling into the trap of someone who takes a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this and writes a book that becomes a bestseller is tricky in our time, because there are so many of those kinds of eclectic masters, quote unquote. Finding an authentic teacher is finding through an authentic lineage, as Michael pointed out. It's not someone who will cherry pick from traditions which produced countless masters who have attained rainbow bodies and complete Buddhahood. It's not to compare to the best-selling author. So, that's one marker. The other marker is someone doing something to sell a book, or are they doing it for the welfare of other sentient beings? And again, nothing can substitute the unbroken lineage.
Yeah, you have to do some research. So you have to look into some of these teachers, Tibetan Buddhist teachers, and then you look up their bio or something and see how long they've been teaching, who were their teachers,
Yes.
What lineage they come from, look up what that lineage is and look up their history. You got to do some legwork. But the teacher should be from where we, the type of Buddhism we study, from one of the 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism, pretty much, or there's a more specific to look at who their teachers were, who they got teachings from, and look up those teachers, and you'll start to see the lineage and the connection through history, of the who their teachers was and how these teachings go back generation after prior generation. It's important.
Yeah.
And there's plenty. Like I said, go to the website that we said, Solidago Productions, Meditation with Michael Imperioli, the YouTube. We have a lot of books. We have these teachers. Any teacher that we're mentioning is an authentic, from an authentic lineage. So you can start there and, do your research.
And try to avoid diluted Buddhist teachings, because really,
What do you mean by diluted
they're either
Buddhist teaching?
the cherry-picked bestsellers, where we're okay with this part of Buddhism, but we're not okay with reincarnation. We're okay with this. If you take away the reincarnation, everything that we call karma, cause, and effect falls apart as well. So, the good comes with the difficult. There's no bad, there's nothing in karma. Karma, when we're experiencing the effects of karma, we're experiencing, like surgical convalescing. Karma is a purifying and cleansing thing. If we don't take it as a thing that stabs our ego, we understand it on a completely different level. We know that, yes, I've experienced a difficult thing, but now it has purified me. I've left it, and now I am convalescing. So that's the way to understand karma. It's not about woe is me. My life is worse than everybody else's. That's cultivating ego. So, finding the authentic Buddha Dharma will give an insight to all kinds of things, as uh, for teachers and practitioners who've studied it for many, many years, you can learn these kinds of things. But again, it's about the complete path and not this little designer little path that is easy and is easily digestible, and it comes in the form of a bestseller. So
Okay, we're going to dedicate the merit from today's class for the benefit of all beings, which is what we always do. So have no mistake that how important this is. If we start the class and end the class, uh, with the intentions to benefit all beings, just think of how critical those aspects of this practice is, right? By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And thank you to Nick Solidago for producing this class.
Thank you all.
Through his kindness and generosity, we're able to do this every week. See you next week.